Today, we peer into a world where shadowy government stooges manipulate the levers of fiscal policy from deep in their evil lairs. They pick economic winners and losers and control the business cycle, creating recessions and controlling inflation to serve their nefarious purposes.
Nah, fiscal policy is a completely legitimate tool used by non-shadowy government officials to correct fluctuations in the economy. Okay, in previous videos, we've discussed the business cycle and how the economy goes up and down and up and down and up and down over time. This line represents the economy's potential GDP, the maximum sustainable amount that the economy will produce in the long run. But the business cycle shows that the economy isn't always at its potential. When actual output is below potential, economists call it a recessionary gap. Workers are unemployed and factories are sitting unused. Sometimes actual output can briefly rise above potential. Economists call this an inflationary gap. Unemployment is super low and factories are working overtime, but it's not sustainable. Eventually, producers will bid up the price of scarce resources, and higher costs will lead to more inflation rather than more output. Obviously, real-life fluctuations aren't as predictable as the business cycle might suggest, but every modern industrialized economy has seen times of boom and bust. You know, you get your Empire Strikes Back and you get your Phantom Menace. So look at the real GDP growth rate in the United States since 1920. See, up and down over time. In the mid-1980s, things flattened out, and we had a thing called the Great Moderation. It seemed like the days of deep recessions and high inflation were over. Then came the Great Recession as a result of the 2008 financial crisis. Back to the same old up and down of the business cycle. Both recessionary and inflationary gaps cause serious problems. High unemployment when the economy is bad, that's bad, like really bad. And not just for the economy, for people. High unemployment rates have been linked to higher suicide rates, more domestic violence, and social upheaval. High inflation can be just as bad. Rising costs wipe out savings and have been the root of protests and riots throughout the world. Well, this seems like a fun episode. Stan, what's with all the doom and gloom? Isn't there some way to smooth out these fluctuations? I'm going to answer my own question. There might be. Many economists argue that policymakers should intervene in the macroeconomy in order to promote full employment or reduce inflation. Today, we're going to look at one of the ways to do this: fiscal policy.
The idea of fiscal policy is really simple. When the economy is going too slow or too fast, the government can step on the gas or the brake by changing government spending or taxes. In the United States, that's the job of Congress and the president. When the economy falls into a deep recessionary gap, the government can increase government spending, cut taxes, or do some of both. That's called expansionary fiscal policy. The idea is that government spending creates jobs and increases incomes for construction workers and teachers and other laborers. In turn, these workers spend more of their additional income, increasing consumer spending and boosting the entire economy. Cutting taxes follows a similar logic. A tax cut will increase disposable income for consumers. That'll increase their consumer spending and boost the entire economy.
This is exactly what the U.S. did in 2009, during the depths of the Great Recession. The American Recovery and Reinvestment Act was a stimulus bill that added more than $800 billion to the economy. That stimulus was split 60-40 between new government spending and tax cuts. And the expansionary fiscal policy funded new roads and bridges and upgrades to the electric grid. And those projects created jobs.
But when the economy has an inflationary gap, the government can cut spending or raise taxes or do some combination of the two. That's called contractionary fiscal policy, and that's not half as fun. The idea is that higher taxes will leave consumers with less money to spend, and lower government spending will mean fewer public jobs. All that should reduce consumer spending, cooling off the economy and reducing inflation.
We don't see contractionary fiscal policy very often in practice because politicians rarely want to hit their voters with a slower economy. It's a hard sell, and it could cost policymakers their job. U.S. President George H.W. Bush famously stated, "Read my lips, no new taxes," while campaigning in 1988. A few years later, he agreed to raise taxes to reduce the debt and lost the election in 1992. So the big question here is, does fiscal policy actually work? Does stimulating the economy with spending and tax cuts actually, make the economy grow? That is the most heated debate in modern economics, and it's been raging for decades. It's been known to drive mild-mannered economists to use their loud voices on cable news shows. Let's learn about it in the thought